Hi, and welcome back to my channel. This week we are looking at piecing lace into fabric. For my Red Riding Hood costume, I needed an apron. I was trying really hard to work out of my fabric stash for at least part of this, but just didn't have the right fabric. I did have a few small chunks of eyelet fabric, but they were pretty simple. I had to brave the fabric store for some plain white cotton for the ties because they were super long and I didn't have the right length. And I spotted some awesome spools of cotton crochet trim, and they had several different widths and kind of patterns and whatnot, so I figured I could get creative. There are a few ways you can piece lace into fabric. You can apply it on top of your fabric and then cut out behind it and fold back your finished edges. You can serge the strips and then cover the serging with lace. But I wanted a very clean look and I had a limited amount of eyelet available. So I worked row by row, measuring the pieces for width and length until the finished length of the apron was what I wanted. Right here, I'm actually sewing the wrong sides together of the lace and the fashion fabric. The lace I'm sewing about 1/4 inch in from the edge of the lace, and I have about a 5/8 seam allowance on the fabric. In a moment, you will see why, and how it will give me a very clean and secure finish for the lace and fabric. Here you can see that I have already done several rows, and you can see how I have sewn the next row of the lace to the wrong side of the fabric at a predetermined point. By sewing the wrong sides of the lace to the wrong side of the fabric, it allows me to very carefully fold down and trim away the seam allowance to a scant 1/8 of an inch. Once I've trimmed away the seam allowance, I'll be able to press the lace and the seam down to the front and top stitch the edge, thereby encasing the seam allowance under the lace. Here you can see, after it's trimmed and pressed, I'm simply straight stitching the edge of the lace. To me, it's very similar to the idea of a felled seam, only I'm using lace instead of seam allowance. And here are all the bottom rows. You can see the variety of lace patterns and how it breaks up and adds interest to the basic eyelet I used. I felt the 3 rows of lace were enough to add interest, and that going any higher would kind of get lost in the gathering of the apron. I had predetermined that I wanted a 20-inch apron based on the length of the dirndl skirt, and then also where the trim placement on the bottom of it was, how much of that I wanted to cover. So I added the top piece plus a little bit of seam allowance to end up with 20.5. And here you can see when I turn it over how nicely the seam finish of the lace and the fabric is. It just really gives a clean, crisp edge. Because of the nature of the cotton lace and its tendency not only to fray but also to stretch and sort of shift, I finished the edges with a nice 3/8 hem. And here we are, just looking at the seams again and how pretty they are. For the waistband and ties, I used the pattern. I did add a row of cotton lace to the front of the waistband for added detail, but otherwise it's just a straightforward folded waistband that I gathered the apron to and closed with a top stitch on the front. I did miss my stitch in the ditch by a hair and just went with it for uniformity. The ties, as I mentioned before, are long. They are 1 layer of fabric that has been finished with a 3/8 hem all the way around the edge. Then they were pleated and inserted into the waistband. Ta-da! The finished apron on my dress form. You can see that the ties are meant to wrap fully all the way around the waist. I learned there is actually German dirndl bow etiquette that has you tie it in different places if you're single, married, or serving drinks. I really love how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know your thoughts on this format. Do you like it short, or do you want to see my face and hear me ramble?